Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. And I just want to let you know that this webinar is part of a series, a Wellness Matters series. We usually have talks in our counseling center every month. And during COVID, we have decided to take them virtual so that we can connect with as many people as possible. Today lands kind of about in the middle of our series. We've got about a dozen more. So I invite you to go to the website and see what's coming up and join us for any of them that you're interested in. My name is Nicole Imgrund, and I'm the owner and director of Rivers Edge Counseling Center. We are located in St. Albert, and we've got a team of over 20 psychologists and counselors. We offer counseling services to children and teens, adults, couples, and families. We offer services in person at our center, but also, of course, nowadays, we also offer them from the comfort of people's own homes, sometimes their cars or a park bench, doing the sessions by video and phone as well. Our presenter today is Teddie Fussell. Teddie has been with Rivers Edge Counseling Center for over 5 years, so lucky for us. And she has been a registered psychologist for over 20, which she says, like her birthdays, is long enough to stop counting the exact numbers. Over the course of her career, Teddie has worked in a variety of contexts, including mental health clinics, schools, not-for-profits, employee assistance, and correctional services, giving her much appreciation for how our different circumstances and daily environments can support or challenge our mental health. Married to a first responder for over 20 years, and together they are launching their 18-year-old daughter into the practice of adulthood. Teddie has good perspective of how those on the front lines in the COVID crisis have to cope and the impact for their families supporting them in the background. Teddie currently works with individual adults and couples on conflict and communication challenges in both intimate and work contexts, especially when they involve a betrayal of trust. She also assists clients with mood-related concerns like depression and anxiety, as well as hoarding behavior for those of you who have trouble using your isolation to actually clean out those closets. Really good time to think about our habits of keeping things and clearing things out. Having been born to older parents and adult siblings, but babysitting nieces and nephews since she was young, Teddie has from an early age had the opportunity to witness developmental challenges at all stages of the lifespan. And so she brings that experience to her work with families coping with life cycle transitions such as new parenting, relocation, divorce, and elder care. It is in that work that she has observed how loneliness is an issue at many ages and stages, and understands and adapting our lifelong skills to be practiced. In addition to the webinar today, Teddie is hosting one in a couple of weeks also on hope. Is it a belief or emotion? But today she will share with us what she knows about loneliness and how it is impacting many of us during this time and how we can cope. You will see at the bottom of your screen a chat icon as well as a Q&A. Please let me know, if you don't mind, where it is that you're joining us from. If you're in St. Albert, which area of St. Albert you're in, so we get a sense of who's with us. Share your thoughts and experiences as you go and listen to Teddie's presentation, and also your questions. She'll present for about half an hour, and then at the end, we'll share some of the comments and give Teddie an opportunity to respond to your questions. And with that, I am going to turn it over to you, Teddie.
All right, thanks, Nicole, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me today. Please let Nicole know if you have any trouble hearing me. I have a really soft voice, even in person, so I'm quite used to my family telling me to speak up. And she'll let me know if we need to adjust anything. And as Nicole said, I've been interested in the topic of loneliness for a long time, have experienced it at different ages and stages in my life. and to have witnessed it in others. And it seems a really relevant thing that's getting talked about a lot during this COVID crisis, as our normal means of practicing and connecting with each other are facing new challenges and needing to discover new ways. So I'm just going to share my screen here so you can see a few of the, there we go. So staying mentally healthy, preventing loneliness while physical distancing. And I just love this icon of these straight lines a fair bit apart, but really it's all about our heart and what we're feeling. What I'd like to do with you today, for the time that I'm going to speak first, is talk a little bit about what is loneliness and what it isn't, so that we are all sort of understanding on the same page. What are some of the effects of loneliness and why it's important to address it at this time? What are some of the strategies that we need to think about or things we need to bear in mind in addressing it? And then what are some of the resources that might be helpful for connecting and preventing it for ourselves or our loved ones during this COVID response? So just to talk first a little bit, sometimes it's very easy to confuse or to assume with others that aloneness or loneliness or depression are the same things, and they're really not. When we're talking about someone being alone, that is just the state of being by oneself. Sometimes we refer to it as solitude. If it's, we tend to think of that as a word that reflects more the restorative state that can be part of being alone and being reflective. But people can be alone and not necessarily bothered by that, for sure. When we're talking about loneliness, though, there's an implication always that there's some amount of pain or discomfort with it, that it's involving a desire for something or a desire for connection that's not there or not occurring. That we're always wishing there was something that wasn't there. Now, loneliness can be associated, but isn't necessarily associated with depression, which I think of as much more of social, biological, medical condition that really begins to have an impact on the things that can suppress connection. So turning some really challenging negative thinking, lower energy, lower sexual drive, that really is a part of a multi-factor thing that's going on for people, but often gets in the way of those connections that can be healthy or restorative. So somebody can be depressed, but not necessarily experiencing loneliness. They know where those connections are available. They may or may not feel them, but it isn't necessarily that just because somebody is lonely that they are depressed. Similarly, I love this little video. Being lonely, some people think that's only with one kind of personality type, and that's not necessarily true. This video was, when I found it, it came up just after I'd had a conversation with a few different people, a few different couples that were really noticing a great deal of difference in their response to COVID and the restrictions of needing to socially isolate or stay at home. That particularly in a dyad, one person might be really frustrated or tired with that, and the other person having a much more degree of tolerance or wanting to stay home more, and that causing some conflict. So we can be in relationship but still feel lonely or a desired connection if our values or our beliefs or our ways of being are not matching the people that we're in relationship with. So you can be in relationship and still be lonely. Similarly, some people tend to think that loneliness is more of a factor for introverted people. I always go back to my understanding of the extroversion, introversion dimension on the Myers-Briggs personality inventory, that I understand that it's not necessarily about the amount or number of social connections you have or how outgoing you are, but it really is more about what restores you or brings you a sense of groundedness or peace, almost a spiritual thing in that kind of way. And that somebody can be very quiet and not very social, but they really only feel secure or connected or grounded when they are around other people. So Somebody who is very quiet but likes to be a part of the group might be very struggling with these kinds of working at home and being away from their daily connections with people, even in a limited way. Similarly, the most outgoing and socially connected person everybody likes to be around at work might not be struggling with this at all, because they really, as social and outward as they are, they're really find that their alone time is what restores or renews them. And so they're the ones that are quite happy to connect on the computer or learn a new trade or work away on their own. So it's also about, in looking and preventing loneliness in others, is really about asking what their need is or what they're struggling with, rather than assuming from their outward presentation. Why is it important to address? First of all, loneliness is a normal and actually healthy emotion for us to experience, because it is the thing that motivates us to connect with others. And as a group, through evolution, we've survived much better when we've been together in groups. So we've formed families, and we've formed communities, and we've traveled in packs, and we've settled areas into communities. And so it is something that motivates us to have those good survival patterns, right? And because of that, we know, and with a number of the recent research, that staying socially satisfied helps us boost our heart and circulatory function. It prevents more disruptions in our sleep patterns. It helps improve our immunity and our cognitive functioning and mental health. And as I said earlier, can be a factor in preventing other mental health disorders like depression, although they're not necessarily 100% connected. What's really interesting about that research, I found, is that in order to prevent some of these, and some of these health effects are really quite significant, that social satisfaction can have a greater improvement in early death than not smoking, or things like that, things that would normally think would have a bigger impact physically. Actually making sure that our social connections are healthy has a much better prevention pattern. On the other hand, loneliness sometimes, or the fear of experiencing it and not being able to tolerate it as a healthy motivator, can sometimes lead us to tolerate unsafe behaviors. So, you know, the person in the neighborhood who isn't approaching you at a safe distance, or who is coughing at you, or friends that are inviting you for something that you're not comfortable with, we're afraid of not having those connections. Sometimes it leads us to not speak up or tolerate that. And similarly, we see this in families where domestic violence is happening, that this is somebody you had a commitment with, and it's very, very confusing. You thought there was a very positive thing, and there may be some very positive things in that relationship. But there's a sense of disempowerment and a power imbalance, and somebody's being very much mistreated and hurt. And sometimes the fear of loneliness can interfere with creating some safe boundaries around that. So all things, important things to think about. In terms of strategies, what are some important things that we need to think about in preparing or addressing this? This time of needing to stay a little bit more isolated can be a really important time for us to reflect, that knowing yourself really well helps you know not only what you can offer, but also what's going to match or look or feel good for you. And on the right here is what I call the three-legged stool model of self-esteem or self-concept. And in a three-legged stool concepts, we know that if any one leg is a little bit shorter than the others, it leaves things a little bit wobbly. So although right now our leg of belonging might be a little bit challenged or compromised, by shoring up our other two legs, it can help us search for the right areas to stabilize that leg. So knowing our sense of identity, what are our values, what are our interests, who have we been at different parts in our lives, what kind of roles have we had to fulfill before, and being able to come back to maybe some old things that we've let go of that we can rely on in a new way, or put out there. Similarly, the other leg is our sense of competence. What things maybe do people not know about us that we might be willing to share, or and can be really helpful in finding ways of connecting. I tend to be not a very physical person. I sit and listen to people all day, and I like to read and things like that. But I also really enjoy woodworking, and I've been doing some sanding as part of renovating, and it takes a fair bit of physical upper body strength. So we had a really neat exchange. I was working on something next door to some family at our recreational property, and my niece said, "Oh, I've got some tables that are getting really worn. Can you help me refinish these?" And I said, "Sure." I said, but in return, she had, through one of her work experiences, developed some skills in bookbinding, which is not a very known skill. And so I said, well, we'll all love our Harry Potter series, but they're all falling apart. Will you help me bookbind them if I help you refinish these tables? So it was a really neat exchange for one tiny little skill that was tucked away that people we didn't know or we didn't share with each other a lot. So those are the kinds of things that can help us think about and share. And what then help us define our sense of belonging? What are we looking for? What creates that? For some, that's a very close sense of intimacy. And for others, belonging doesn't necessarily have to be that close. It can be farther away. But always, I think, we all need a variety of those kinds of connections. And so spending some time to really think about or map out who your connections are in all different circles, being intimate, those that are closer are usually the most obvious and well known, but some of our acquaintances, and who all might be in our community. Who is that grocery teller that we have seen their face a million times? Maybe we know their first name from their name tag, and we talk to once a week, but we don't really know. All of those can be part of our community of belonging. And sometimes when we're challenged in one area of connection, we may need to move people from outer circles closer in, or maybe sometimes, as in cases where an intimate relationship, marriage is not going well and maybe leading to divorce, we need to move them out. And we may need to rely on some people in some of those other things. Needing to rely on close friends after a divorce or something like that is really important. I'm seeing a big part of that in this COVID response, that people, in having to stay home, are getting to actually see and know their neighbors a whole lot more, and becoming more of creating a sense of belonging in their neighborhood that we've kind of lost a little bit as we've become more urban and 24-hour societies. So this is a good time, but I know when people are struggling with loneliness or struggling with social connections or struggling with change, we often spend some time writing out who all they can think of. We've had a lot of people reaching out to their old friends that they hardly talk to through Facebook and things when they've got time to actually sit and do that now. So sometimes mapping that out and really challenging yourself to include as many people as you can possibly think of in each circle helps you be a little bit more aware of where you might bring things in or move things out. It also identifies maybe who we need to connect with in a new way when we only relied on being at that grocery store to see that teller. And where you're not going there as often, but if we want to express some appreciation, maybe we need to send that email to the store to say, thank you for your service, as Google is putting on their Google logo every day. Thank you to all the first responders. Or having a FaceTime party instead of a face-to-face one. And sometimes if we feel really challenged in our relationships or challenged to feel a sense of closeness or really say hi, sometimes we can get that sense of community too, or a sense of even belonging, and just being a part or participating in something, taking some responsibility for that, even in an anonymous way. So sending out a greeting or an act of service. I've been putting, as many of my neighbors have, just messages of hope and encouragement up in my front window. And I don't really know who is looking at those, although my daughter did tell me somebody stopped to take a picture of one day, so that was nice. I don't really know who's seeing that or if anybody appreciates it or if they not, but it's just making me feel good and making me feel part of being aware of my neighborhood to do that and put that out there. So that can be helpful. One of the biggest barriers for many people though in working with or overcoming loneliness is really feeling shy or having a challenge, a fear of intimacy or a fear of rejection. But really right now, I think is one of the most ideal times to challenge yourself, to be more accepting of yourself in order to put yourself out there, because there is a lot of conversation and community around feeling uncertain and feeling vulnerable and feeling imperfect, as Brene Brown says here, because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. And that's really also part of some of our other webinars have talked about the concept of self-compassion. And one of the components of that being common humanity is that we really do connect over our imperfections. You see it in the source for a lot of our humor is about what isn't quite right. And right now, nobody has a great hairdo that they feel confident about presenting in the best way. And nobody's sure what next week is going to look like versus this week. So taking a risk and putting a little bit of yourself out there. I even suggested a community activity, and I got really a little bit panicky about putting that up there, thinking, oh, what will this be received, or will people think I'm crazy, or will people? And I thought, well, I'm never going to know till I try. So being vulnerable, as Brene also says, it sounds like truth, because that really is about who we are in all parts of ourselves. But it feels very courageous to take that and put that out there. And just like change, truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weaknesses. And we need to remember and encourage ourselves that in order to reach out and connect. Similarly, those that have talked about or philosophize or research about building community talks about a restorative community. And that's always one that focuses and values possibility and relatedness over the problems. So as heartbreaking as so many of the challenges that COVID is representing to us and our ways of needing to manage it medically, not being able to see our seniors and our loved ones and touch them and hold them in their challenge, or our ill ones, people are getting very creative around overcoming these kinds of things. The number of drive-by parades and fun activities. I saw a dad that had hooked up his lawn tractor in 3 different wagons, all spaced apart with blankets and almost like an old-fashioned hay bale wagon ride, taking his kids a ride around the lawn and waving at people. So really, I'm so impressed at all the creativity that's coming out, and some of it's working and some of it's not, and some of it's silly and some of it's very touching, and some of it's thought-provoking, and we wouldn't get to experience any of that if we didn't take those risks and put that out there. So what kinds of resources are there to help us? And I loved this term when I found it on this little Today website, in isolationship. So that just because we're in isolation doesn't mean we aren't part of relationship, but I love this new term, isolationship. So when we can't be face-to-face, what is available to help us? So there's a few different things that I found, some ideas and some resources on different parts of the way this COVID response has challenged our experiences of connecting and perhaps fostering some loneliness. Just generally about loneliness and staying positive. The Web of Loneliness is a resource that's very rich in many things. It was started by when he was a young man, a fellow that came from South America to do his postgraduate work or graduate studies in the United States, and really found, because of some of the cultural things he didn't understand and just being in a new area that he hadn't been in before, he experienced a lot of loneliness. So he decided to make that the focus of his doctoral research. And so he's published some of that loneliness and kept it up. And I believe he's actually gone on to have a professorship in a university, and there's a chat room and places that people can leave creative experiences about and expressive experiences. There's research, there's strategies, blog posts, all those kinds of things. So it's quite a rich resource. Similarly, Hope Cafe is not necessarily talking about loneliness, but about the experience or challenges to hope, which also can go hand in hand. And it's a place where people can express experiences about that. And I just love the idea that that's a cafe, but that we don't have to drive to that one. Similarly, for people who have experienced some social anxiety or things that are a little bit harder for them, to make it harder for them to reach out for others, I did find on Facebook and social media there are numerous introvert and social anxiety chat rooms where people are finding a sense of community in their experience of loneliness and challenges in connecting. So feel free. There were so many I couldn't possibly list them all, but they were really quite interesting to find out. Many people are really concerned most about or struggling most with our more senior population, that because they're feeling more at risk with this COVID are not the ones going to the grocery store and not getting out. Again, what's really we need to keep in mind and hopeful about that is that even if we don't know somebody in a long-term care center, reaching out or doing something that way can really make a difference, because even those non-intimate connections can be important in fostering physical health as well. The Seniors Without Walls program, I've done some talks for them, and I just love the idea of this program, especially because many seniors aren't familiar or comfortable with technology. It just uses the phone. However, right now, because of the COVID response, the challenges, last I heard, they were very full and not taking new people to their programs right now, but down the line, or as this response carries off and some seniors are able to make more face-to-face contacts, maybe some of that participation will drop off and there will be room if that's a format that would be good for you or your loved one. I love that the long-term care centers are encouraging people to write just a letter, to send them an email that's a general letter telling them a little bit about yourself or asking a couple of questions that the staff, if they have time, can read and share, and just know that somebody out there is thinking of them. And snail mail is still working. Most of our society is not used to working that way, but many of them are and still can do that. I'm seeing lots of ways of people connecting more with their acquaintance networks by sharing recipes or exchanges of affirmation, the old-fashioned chain letters and things like that are very popular right now. You know, many seniors still have, they're not getting used to, but they're used to some physical freedom, and that's being limited right now. So if you have a GoPro and can go for a drive, just recording that and sharing that with somebody online with a little bit of commentary or not, just some peaceful and quiet reflection can be great. Many young families that are struggling with at-home homework, I hope they're being mindful to use their neighborhood and resource and senior population as reading buddies, being read to by the children, or doing paired reading. And we have a webinar available. I think we've had that one already. Nicole, you can correct me, but if not, it'll be coming up on strategies for reading at home or encouraging reading at home. So that's a really important one to foster that connection. The old-fashioned call-in radio shows or podcasts, or learning a new thing. There's many, many courses being put out on the internet and webinar, as you all are participating today, on different topics by master. There's a whole series called Masterclass. And even though it might be not somebody that you know well, connected, it's a part of being connected or with another person in some way and sharing intellectually in that way. It doesn't actually have to be conversation, singing or poetry. even sharing together many of the meditation apps. If you're the senior that's not comfortable to using that, but could be on the phone while you play, many of the meditation and relaxation apps that are out there have adult bedtime stories. If sleep is a challenge or if that's the only time there is a time to connect with the senior when the little ones are challenging a lot during the day. Just sharing that. And again, it's the whole idea of replacing what you would normally do in our sense of space and do it in time, just so you have a similar sense of presence. So even just explaining step by step what you're cooking to somebody, or telling them what the kids are doing. And that can be an important strategy for ourselves as well in feeding our sense of touch, which is one of the main things that we are missing so desperately as part of our sense of connection. Again, describing a sensation even doesn't have to be kinky or strange in any way, although if that's your thing, that's fine. But and some of our mindfulness activities can be just even slowly tracing each finger up and down. And if you have somebody that you can connect to and just even describe that for, so that they can do it at the same time. You know, I'm moving my finger now down the side and I can feel the sharpness of my nail, and then the bump of my joint, and then into the fleshy part of my thumb, and then up. And carrying on in that way is just a way of sharing an experience together in the same time rather than the same space. Okay. And that's a great one to do between other generations and children. Many people are talking about their sense of loneliness and not being able to see or hug their grandchildren. So can you both share a sensation at the same time, hug a stuffy at the same time? My daughter and her grandmother always used to have kind of when neither one of them want to be the one to hang out first, they'd have a race and say 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, hug your stuffy, and then say goodbye, or any of those new kinds of rituals that we might be able to develop. I was also listening to a webinar myself on some of our psychological experts who were talking about managing uncertainty in these times. And one of the fellows was talking about being aware and relying a little bit more on our inner refuges. And I love that term. But he was talking about when we can't actually physically or time-wise connect to somebody, to reminisce about a time when you felt particularly nurtured and cared for by somebody. And that can be a beautiful experience to just slow down and think about every step of that, rather than it just being a flash of a memory. My first thought when I listened to him say that was, well, what about the people who've never really had a positive experience, who've always been challenged? They've always felt a sense of not really feeling like a quite fit in, or that they've been a history of being very mistreated in many of their relationships. And so usually those people, if you're experiencing a sense of loneliness or a lack of belonging, you're still aware of something that might feel like. So whether it was somebody else who modeled that for you, that you had observed and admired, another family or something, or even a fictional character that you really felt connected to just take some time. Our imaginations can be very powerful and have a very powerful physical effect on us, to just take a time to imagine what it would be like to feel very nurtured by that person, and what that would entail for you can still have a positive effect on us. Generally, for connecting ourselves, many people are aware, but some are not, about the website meetup.com. Some people might be afraid of that title. It sounds like a dating website. And there are definitely some groups on there that are meant for meeting and developing intimate relationships, but there are many, many that are not, that are much more about connecting over a common interest or experience. So whether that be business leadership or photography or moms with preschoolers, and many of those have gone viral, but it's a great and very interesting resource to see what's available out there, and how people are making themselves available to connect. One of the early Facebook groups that got started in this COVID response, the link is there, and it's all about matching the needs of somebody with somebody's competence and sense of purpose. And that's really important in staying not lonely, and challenging loneliness is also to have a sense of purpose with others. that's out there. Locally, there's been many more developed, and there's many community apps or social media. Nextdoor is a very popular one. Some that are local here to St. Albert. The St. Albert chat is more about sharing our experiences, and St. Albert community pages is about resources and things like that. Not everybody's aware that also the city of St. Albert has a program. Our communities are safer when we are connected. So they have in many of the St. Albert neighborhoods, and if you're from another community, you can check with your local Family and Community Support Service office about this, if they have a similar program. But they've identified a volunteer in several neighborhoods whose job it is to get to know the people on the street and what they're about and what's interesting about them and help that neighborhood feel connected. So feel free to be in touch with them. Some of the little free libraries around sharing, many of those have been removed for COVID and things like that, but there are things to be mindful and aware of for the future when we are able to connect again in some of the ways that are restricted now. As I said before, learning something new or participating in something together, many of the worship services have gone online. And while we can't be present or don't necessarily know the people involved, even the people being in this webinar together is a way of practicing something together or sharing something together. So feeling yourself a part of that. And when we get to our chat and questions, we'll address that a little bit more. As I said, just participating in a community game or a project and that sense of purpose and value, being a part of something can be a relief, even if you're not necessarily knowing directly, but it is a good place to start in making those connections. And last but certainly not least, we're really interested in how we might help you as a counseling center here connect. So we've started currently a grief group, hearing a lot about how this COVID experience has exacerbated already standing grief concerns. People that have just lost somebody recently and were just getting back on their feet and then felt knocked off again by some of the changes and challenges and vulnerabilities that we're facing. So being able to share about that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nicole, but I think we're also starting a mom's group one around that. But if you have ideas or interests of things that you would like to have some ongoing discussion and support about it, please let us know. We'd love to do that. So that's kind of what I've been thinking so far. But just before I leave you today, and this always kind of chokes me up, and I'm not sure why, but Marina Keegan was a young woman who was a budding writer, and then she died quite suddenly and tragically. And many of her works have been published posthumously, and one of her most famous ones is called The Opposite of Lonliness. And I've always liked this, but it just really struck me as what many of us are experiencing, or very speaks to this current pandemic experience. We don't have a word for the opposite of loneliness, but if we did, I could say that that's what I want in life. It's not quite love, and it's not quite community. It's just this feeling that there are people, an abundance of people who are in this together, who are on your team. When the check is paid and you stay at the table, when it's 4 a.m. and no one goes to bed, that night with the guitar, that night we can't remember, that time that we did, we went, we saw, we laughed, and what I think is most important, we felt. And there's nothing more to me that speaks to our sense of humanity than our sense of feeling together. So
that's beautiful. I haven't heard that before.
Those are some of my thoughts, but Nicole, have you been?
Yeah, do you want to just stop screen sharing?
There we go.
Bring us up here. Yeah. For anyone who can't join us for the discussion, I just want to thank you for being with us today. And know that you can send us a question anytime. You can send it to info@riversedgecounseling.com. I'll for sure forward it to Teddie. And if you have ideas about other things that we can do and ways we can support you in this time, do let us know. I am looking at the chat now and the Q&A. I'm just so curious how you're all doing. If you have other ideas that you can share with the community here about ways that you have managed in this time.
Nicole, I'm just looking at where people have indicated that they're from, and we've got
Yeah.
several that are nice and physically in our neighborhoods here in St. Albert, but we're reaching really all over Canada.
Yeah,
Someone
we've
joining
got
us from
somebody in
Montreal,
Quebec. Yeah.
Quebec, and Northern Alberta. For many of you, we're thinking about the extra challenges of not just COVID, but being isolated from your homes as evacuations and things have occurred up there. So our
Yeah,
thoughts are with you on that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Lots of people from St. Albert, all the letters, the various different communities around St. Albert. People saying this was really helpful and great ideas, good information. I see some caregivers have also joined us. This was wonderful, Teddie. Thank you for sharing this information. You've given me lots of ideas for support. Someone is saying, it never dawned on me that you could be lonely in a relationship. I know I have felt this. And I know when I am out participating in activities within my community, it lines up with my values and I don't feel lonely. I feel full and loved and am able to give so much love back freely. Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank you. You said, any other questions about loneliness or concerns or just even thoughts, ideas and ways that people would like to connect around their experiences of loneliness?
Someone is saying they're hosting a stay-at-home concert with Martin Kerr in our neighborhood. Oh, that's awesome. I've seen a few of those on social media.
Yeah,
good for you. I wish you lived in Erin Ridge. I wish I was part of that.
Well, I think he still actually was seeing a news clip on him the other day, and he's hoping to carry these on even after we're allowed to be together again. And I first encountered Martin actually a couple of years ago when we were still allowed indoors with each other at a house concert. And yeah, he's a very talented and charismatic entertainer for sure.
And someone's saying, I love Martin Kerr. Where's this happening? Do you want to give your neighborhood away? I'm a little worried if we do, you might end up with too many people. But good to know we can maybe contact him on social media. And more people are asking, where is it happening? I can check his Facebook page, someone's saying. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, or if you're interested in, that's another way to overcome loneliness, is bring people to use, to put something out there. So if you really like that idea, maybe start one in your neighborhood. He would love that, or many other people would love to do those kinds of things. I saw that one in Saskatchewan about, was a children's mental health worker that wasn't going to the office, and he made this really crazy costume and just was taking donations for entertaining children. He was just, it was like a clown.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Funny.
She's saying, if you message him, you can have your own. Yeah, sounds like he's open. Someone is saying, appreciated understanding the difference between being alone and loneliness. Being a person who loves to volunteer in my community, not being able to do that now does cause a feeling of being alone sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a real loss too when those things that bring us a sense of meaning and purpose in life, are taken away as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's where we are sometimes challenged to think about how we might offer those things again, maybe in time versus space, or in a new way for sure.
Mm-hmm. I loved hearing what you're doing in your window, Teddie. But yeah, it reminded me how we can reach out and help in such simple ways that make a difference.
Yeah.
Someone from Sturgeon County is saying, my loneliness is exactly one thing you mentioned, not seeing, hugging, kissing my adult children, their spouses, and granddaughter. My frustration also includes not having answers when we will be allowed to include them in our bubble, especially when we were all isolating and remaining healthy. I have a second grandchild due in 2 weeks, which makes us all anxious to go and help out.
Yeah, that sense of wanting to help very much. And again, when we're not able to hold that new baby, but maybe being able to sing to it over the phone or over FaceTime or those kinds of things can be a way of doing that. I saw somebody else who was asking about where we can find that quote. I have one more slide in the webinar that will be published on the website. If we can, Nicole, where they could find that quote from Marina Keegan. I believe there is a book of her published works actually called The Opposite of Loneliness, but I have the reference and I can put that up in a minute when I can share my screen and go back to my other screen for a minute.
Yeah, yeah. The last comment just reminded me of those milestones that just happen in life, and they may be happening right now that make it extra difficult and require extra creativity. Yeah, how to figure out how to make them special and be present for those things.
Yeah, I love the one in St. Albert. Was a pair of twins that were celebrating their 18th birthday that they'd been planning for a month, and they weren't able to do that. So the neighborhood put on a traveling
like a party.
Yeah, they set out a shot on the front. Maybe not what you really want to encourage an 18-year-old, but
yeah. But they seemed so, like, they felt so cared about. Can you imagine people ringing with little lights and making little tiki bars? So.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Awesome.
That was fun. Yeah.
Someone is saying another thing that really struck me during this was that I am usually considered to be quite an extrovert. I am bubbly and enjoy being around people. But this talk made me realize that before COVID isolation, I actually had more moments of loneliness when I had the freedom to visit with people and now feel more connected with others. I always joke and say I am an introverted extrovert, and I am enjoying this time in isolation as it is allowing me a moment to pause and reflect and connect with others on a different level.
Wow, yeah, that's great. We're realizing more about ourselves, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Someone's talking about a great kitchen party, music every Wednesday night, 6 to 8 live on Facebook. Oh, yeah, there's been some really neat offerings on Facebook from musicians. And yeah, I got to attend a cabaret with some Broadway stars last weekend. Yes. It was amazing to see them. Yeah. I do miss seeing smiles, though, as it hit me hard while shopping at Costco, someone's saying, and I was surrounded by everyone wearing masks. As I went to the cash, I realized just how much I miss seeing people's faces. And I mentioned this to the cashier, and he too said this is something he noticed and he misses as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So many hundreds of little messages that we pick up in these interactions that we don't even realize until it's gone.
Right.
All the information that we take in our social interactions.
Yeah. I'll have to make more of a point of being conscious of smiling with my eyes.
Oh, yeah, that's
right. That used to be an old saying.
Yeah, exactly. We have put out seats on our front lawn and make a point to sit out front so we can see people and kids in our neighborhood and chat with them.
Yeah, the old front porch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great idea.
Definitely seeing people in our neighborhood more than I ever have. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, just that little choice to sit in the front yard instead of the back is important right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other questions or comments before we sign off? I have to say your participation, in these things and being willing to share your experiences has really been one of the things that have made these webinars so rich. Good learning for all of us and connection too. Yeah. Good. I think we're reaching the end of the conversation. Yes. Again, please do let us know if you have ideas about other ways we can reach out. Join us for any of the webinars. We would love to have you. And one more comment. I'm truly blown away by so much creativity and ways to connect. Even just this webinar is greatly appreciated and amazing to be able to participate in. Thank you so much. Yeah, we really are learning a lot about the power of human creativity and how much we want to connect, that we're all working so hard to find ways to make that happen. Well, with that, we will sign off, and I wish you all well, stay healthy, and I hope you'll join us again. Take care.
Stay disciplined, stay connected.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.